Good day, you're watching Business World Live. I'm Danny Laurel.
And I'm Jesse De Los Santos. Here are today's top stories. The peso is nearing its all-time low as the local currency plummeted to its lowest level against the dollar in more than 17 years.
Now, as the public grapples with rising prices, more than half of Filipinos want the Marcos administration to prioritize controlling inflation.
Local businessmen have a message to foreign investors. The Philippines is wide open for business under the Marcos Jr. administration.
And the SEC cancels the registration of WELLCONS Unlimited systems for a scheme that resembles a Ponzi scam. We begin our broadcast with the peso shedding 39 centavos on Tuesday to close at its lowest level in more than 17 years.
Year to date, the local currency is down by 10.5% from its 51 per dollar level last December 31, 2021. The peso closed at 56.37 versus the greenback on Tuesday. This was the peso's weakest level since November 5, 2004. The peso even plunged to an intraday low of 56.45, matching the all-time low recorded almost 18 years ago. The Bangko Sentral has earlier said it's ready to take a more aggressive stance to prop up the peso and to arrest rising inflation. As Filipinos grapple with soaring prices, the Marcos administration is now under more pressure to tame inflation. In fact, more than half of Filipinos want the government to prioritize measures to control inflation, among other economic concerns. Data from Pulse Asia shows that 57% of Filipinos believe inflation is the most urgent national concern. This is followed by increasing the pay of workers, which is pushed for by 45% of Filipinos. Other economic-related issues that ranked high in the public's list of urgent national concerns include poverty, employment, and corruption. Now, economic issues take center stage as more and more Filipinos feel the pinch of higher costs as well as the weakness of the peso. To get his take on where we are headed, we have on the show Butch LANZONA, economic professor at the Ateneo de Manila University. Prof. Butch, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, to kick things off, sir, how low can the peso go? Should we be expecting further weakness here from the currency?
I guess it depends on the world conditions. No? Most of the currencies are getting stronger, meaning they're actually appreciating their currency, particularly in the case of the US. So the idea is they're raising interest rates mainly as a way to control their own inflation. Mm-hmm. So it actually depends on how these other countries will react. I guess the hostilities in the Ukraine is creating a lot of this commotion. So the cessation of the hostilities in Ukraine could actually go a long way to make things more stable. But it's very hard to predict right now exactly up to what level this will go up. Mm-hmm.
But Prof, we saw that yesterday this happened amid the record trade deficit that the Philippines ever recorded. Can you attribute this to the oil prices and the importing of that? And now that the oil is going below $100 a barrel, do we see at least some reprieve in the short term for our currency?
Well, basically, I wouldn't be normally I wouldn't be too much concerned about the depreciation, because the general idea here is that a depreciation would make your exports cheaper. Mm-hmm. So presumably with a weaker, which other countries have actually done before. They try to depreciate their currency to make their exports cheaper, and they were able to attain some measure of growth. But my worry right now is the fact that there seems to be a worldwide recession, and this is sort of driving this chain of events that would result in even greater depreciation and eventually higher inflation for us, because we do import a lot of products, but including rice, and that will have an effect on our growth. So I would think that the situation will not become better unless we are able to solve this, this disruption that is coming from the war in Ukraine.
Prof, yourself, you just mentioned you shouldn't be too worried. Also, the Bangko Sentral has mentioned we shouldn't be too worried. But of course, for the normal consumer here, we look at the levels.
Yeah.
Until what level should we say we shouldn't be worried, and is still a healthy number that illustrates that we are importing for capital formation, for growth? And at what level can you say that it's quite worrying in terms of a flight from capital?
It's quite worrying right now, right?
Okay.
The fact that as you mentioned, this is the lowest since in the last 18 years, right? It's a very low. It's a very low value for our peso. So, given the fact that there is a world recession, and given the fact that there is the fact that we do import a lot of the products that we are consuming right now, then it's a very worrisome situation right now. Any further depreciations would probably cause a lot more difficulties for the average consumer.
Okay, Prof, there are some corners who actually are of the opinion that currencies are weakest in countries wherein the central bank isn't able to narrow the gap between inflation rate and interest rate. Now, question is, you have the BSP signaling the possibility of a 50 BP hike by next month. Are they a little far behind the curve here?
I think that would be just right, no? I mean, well, during the...
Well, it seems as though we are having technical issues. Okay, there you go.
Basically, but we would...
Go ahead,
okay,
Prof, as you were saying.
Can you still hear me? Okay. Okay. During the pandemic, right? The height of the pandemic, I'm not sure if you've already overcome the pandemic. No? But the idea is that during the height of the pandemic, we had lower interest rates. The idea out there was to try to expand the economy, no? Because we were facing a lot of a lot of these challenges as far as production goes. But right now, when apparently we're moving towards recovery, then it's sort of creating some it's sort of overheating the economy right now, and it's generating as well, apart from the the imported inflation that we have, the previous policy of lowering interest rates would also be a factor why inflation is getting higher.
Okay.
Yes.
Prof, we are waiting, of course, for the print of inflation in the United States, which is set to be the highest in 40 years, probably 8.8% according to some economists. But they did mention that possibly that June print might have been the peak na. What about here in the Philippines domestically? Will we be expecting the peak to have passed, or are we still awaiting for second round effects?
On the way there?
Well, you see, the problem with the Philippines is that while you might say that the pandemic is over, the infections have gotten lesser. You might say that the cases are not much more different. We have less severe cases, more asymptomatic cases. I think we're still sort of grappling with the effects of the pandemic. A lot of people right now are demanding for subsidies. They still haven't found work, right? We are still facing a lot of challenges as far as our local production of products. So the inflation now, which was started by the global economy, inflation now would more or less be more locally generated. It's now become more of a problem with the demand. So I think that even though maybe the conditions worldwide might be sort of stabilizing, we're still faced with the idea that we need to spend more, no? Especially in terms of food, in terms of education, and that means that the inflation might still remain. The problem is that we were not able to set up a proper stimulus program that that could sort of carry us as we move towards more recovery. So you still have all of these impact. I mean, the impact of the pandemic still with us, and that's really the first thing that we need to solve first. So while conditions worldwide might be better, we're still, I think, we're still going to be in a difficult situation.
Prof, how do you see consumption behavior changing due to high levels of inflation here? Do you at least expect Filipinos to cut back on non-essential spending like leisure activities?
Or is revenge spending still there?
Yeah. Well, I guess you will expect that. There's really no choice. So you will notice that traffic now is less heavy than before, right?
Talaga ba?
And people basically, actually, that's what I went to Makati yesterday, and I noticed that. Well, I haven't been traveling. More. I wanted. Most of my classes are done online, and it was the first time in many months that I drove to Makati, and I found that the traffic is less.
Okay, I think we're having connection problems with Professor. I would have to agree though with him.
Ayan,
There you go,
siya sa
Prof.
lab.
Especially in the case of the transportation, no? Especially in the case of transportation. Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, actually, a lot of people are asking the government to declare the situation right now as some sort of crisis situation, and the government needs to respond to that, and therefore they need to play a more important role. They need to spend more, and that could bring about, given the fact that assuming that you still have all of these supply constraints, both locally and internationally sourced, then you would have more inflation coming.
Sir, can the government spend more at this point compared to how the previous administration handled the pandemic, which was basically tightening our belts? Former Finance Secretary Dominguez didn't want to default on our debt.
That's the challenge. Yeah.
Okay.
That's the challenge that the new administration is facing. So if you look at their DBCC targets, right? Of course, there are many priorities. But the only detailed target that they have is really on infrastructure. So what they want to do is to try to outgrow the debts. No? So we have so much debts, but the idea is that that shouldn't be a problem if the economy is growing. The question now is, how do we grow this economy? And I guess the plan is to pour in more infrastructure. But how do you do that again? So you need to attract foreign investments.
Okay.
Right? I think that's they're trying to institute the PPP again, no? To attract foreign investments to come to the country. So that will seem to be the solution that they have right now at present.
Sir,
But
are you
again,
confident
the question
that
now is, will that solve the basic problem of food? And I don't know. No, I mean, I would rather think that maybe we could first try to solve the food crisis with whatever resources we have right now, and then to move on from there. No? Maybe one of the ways of increasing food production is infrastructure. So my point is that we need to come up with clear-cut plans. No, we need to come up with comprehensive programs, not just targets, to put us back in place.
Okay, interesting. So infrastructure is the key here of the new administration. Sir, how likely is a recession in the Philippines? Because other countries are, it's probably inevitable in the United States. Europe is also bracing for one, but it seems we might be insulated. Is this a positive thing? Why we feel more inflows from foreign investors because of this fact that we might be fundamentally more resilient than others?
I'm not so sure if we're that resilient. So I think there's a threat of a recession.
Okay.
But it depends on how well we're able to attract more foreign investments. And so if we're able to, everybody's waiting for this government plan, which presumably is going to be announced when the president gives his State of the Nation address. So if the investors see that as being viable, then there might be a chance that we could avoid a recession. But otherwise, I don't see how we can get away from it. So, yeah, it's important that we come up with a plan, and
Okay, it seems as though we're not as resilient as we thought we are, at least from the
At the
perspective of
moment.
Professor
Yeah,
Butch.
I don't think so. It's as I said, the problem is that we haven't really gotten over the pandemic.
Tama.
I mean,
Right.
as far as infection goes, probably it's lower, but we still have the economic problems.
So, ibig sabihin,
And
Prof,
then as
are you
move
as
the
optimistic
resources to
as a
the economy,
DBCC?
that problem might even get worse. Because what you want to do now is you want to push the recovery. You want to put the resources in infrastructure, and that might cause a drift, no, in our potential. So during the pandemic, we've been trying to maintain our our health, our the welfare of the individuals, but we had to spend a lot of money for that. No? Question now is, can we give up all of this money that we had spent and put it back to the
In
economy
infrastructure.
without
Sacrificing our welfare.
maintaining
Tama.
the welfare that our country enjoys.
All right.
So that's the idea is to make sure that we're able to achieve all of these short-term targets without damaging the future. No? That's the main challenge.
Okay, but of course, focus on the crisis points at the moment, especially the food supply side issues and the inflation. And then pag maayos na yan, medyo marami pa tayong ibang problema kailangan i-tackle.
Thank you very much for
the goal is really to solve that thing first, and then from there trying to find a way to raise infrastructure, and it has to be a comprehensive plan, clear-cut plan,
and hopefully we get more of that in the near future.
Connect the dots together.
Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Salamat,
Again,
Prof.
Ateneo Economics Professor Butch LANZONA. Thank you, sir. Now let's pause for a quick break, but coming right up after that. The group wants to tell the world that the country is open for business.
More of that and other stories when Businessworld Live returns. Stay with us.
And you're still watching Business World Live here on One News. I'm Jess De Los Santos.
And I'm Danny Laurel.
Now, the country is wide open for business under the Marcos Jr. administration. That's the message business chambers want to get across to foreign investors. Mobile journalist Pamela Vasquez with a story.
After a long lockdown, the Philippines is open and ready for business. At least that's what the country's largest business group wants to tell the world.
The investors now are in a position they are eager to know what the new administration is preparing for the next 6 years. So the sentiment of foreign investors, they're all ears now, and it's a good opportunity for us as a country.
And so the group is holding the 48th Annual Philippine Business Conference and Expo on October 19 to 20, which will be attended by key policymakers and industry leaders. The PCCI is forecasting the economy could grow by at least 6% in the second half of this year. They say even 8% is possible once face-to-face classes resume. The Education Department recently announced it's targeting full face-to-face classes by November 2. But key to that is who's taking over the DOH.
It's important that the new Secretary of Health lay out the groundworks, okay? And if we're going to open the school by August, by this time, there must be some preparation that must be put in place.
The PCCI also warned of several risks ahead.
The PCCI is worried about lingering issues. First, the peso. The peso is breaching the 56 peso to a US dollar mark. That is like a 7.5 or 7.4% depreciation. Second, an extremely high fuel surcharge affecting public and private transport, including airline and shipping industries, amongst others. Third, inflation reaching an all-time high of 6.1%, resulting in a spike of non-oil related commodities, energy. The power supply shortages and high electricity rates that disrupt daily economic activities.
But for the most part, the businessmen are confident in the new economic team.
They have been in the business sector, some private and some of them government officials, and they have a proven track record. And we are confident that with the pronouncement of BBM, that he wants to hit the ground running.
Mobile journalist Pamela Vasquez, We Are One News.
The national budget, inflation, and public transportation were in focus during the second cabinet meeting of the Marcos Jr. administration. Even while under isolation, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. led the cabinet meeting yesterday. Solicitor General Menardo Guevara said they also tackled infrastructure projects, tourism, and other industries. Yesterday, Marcos Jr. also led a virtual meeting with the Agriculture Department at the Presidential Guest House in Malacanang. They discussed the rice tariffication law, the current state on rice and livestock production, and the increase in production of high-value commercial crops.
President Bongbong Marcos named another possible member of the cabinet. Marcos Jr. nominated Tony Yulo Loizaga as the Secretary of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. Yulo Loizaga was the chairperson of the International Advisory Board of the Manila Observatory. She's also on the Senior Advisory Board of the AFP's Command and General Staff College. Although Malacanang says her nomination will still be subject to the fulfillment of required documents. The Chamber of Mines of the Philippines welcomed the nomination of Yulo Loizaga as the next DENR Secretary. COMP Chairman Michael Toledo says they are prepared to work with the next Environment Chief in her advocacies in disaster risk reduction and response, sustainable development goals, and climate change protection. Meanwhile, the Alianza Tigil Mina says they are cautiously optimistic with Yulo Loizaga as the next DENR chief. The group explained that they expect her to use and rely more on science-based analysis to decide on environment policies and practices at the department. But since this is her first political appointment, the alliance says she might face serious challenges in the quote vested corporate interests that want to influence DENR policies.
Now, the SEC has revoked the corporate registration of WELLCONS and Limited Systems. This after finding out that the firm is offering a scheme that supposedly allowed investors to double their money within 6 months, among others. As early as February, the SEC had warned the public against investing in WELLCONS through an advisory. In June, the SEC issued a cease and desist order against WELLCONS amid the company's continued operations. The SEC said the company's activities constituted serious misrepresentation as to what it can do, making it a ground for the revocation of its certificate of registration. Before the SEC order, the Davao City Anti-Scam Unit has already padlocked the office of WELLCONS in Matina Crossing, MacArthur Highway.
And the PLDT Group has blocked more web addresses linked to text scams in June, bringing the total links blocked in the first half to 650. The PLDT Group said that this move adds another layer of protection for customers against phishing activities and prevents access to sites that target their personal data. Smishing attacks use text messages to trick mobile phone users into visiting malicious websites. Aside from this, PLDT has also recently inaugurated its Jupiter cable system, which it says serves as an international highway for global data traffic to reach the Philippines. This is expected to boost the country's international capacity to the US and Japan and encourage global trade of digital services.
And those are the biggest stories on the economic and corporate front today. I'm Jess De Los Santos.
And I'm Danny Laurel. We are One News. Don't go away. We'll give you the latest on the local bourse when Business World Live returns. Stay with us.
And you're still watching Business World Live here on One News. Dan, let's get straight to the point. Has the peso rebounded?
All right. Well, rebound is probably not the right word, but inched up a touch might be. It was, of course, at 56.45 per dollar. That was the lowest in 20 years. Now we are at 56.342. So a bit of a reprieve there, but nothing, fantastic. It's still way above 56. This comes, of course, as we had investors pulling out $30 million from stocks just this month. So this year, we've already lost $800 million. Now let's take a quick peek at our index before we end the broadcast, Jess. Also, going the opposite direction of the peso, is actually continuing its slide here, down 0.6%, down 0.8% in the past 3 days, hovering above 6,300 levels there. And just a couple of stocks, JFC, this on the back of a report here from Seoul Economic Daily citing that they may be bidding for a Korea burger brand called Mom's Touch. JFC going against the bourse, up by 0.4% to 213 pesos and 2 centavos, Jess.
All right, things we have to keep tabs on. Hopefully, index won't be as gloomy as the weather for today. And that wraps up today's look at the local bourse. I'm Jess De Los Santos.
And I'm Danny Laurel. Mask on, wash hands, stay safe, Philippines. We are One News.